It's wild to think about. The very religion that worked to erase paganism ended up keeping parts of it alive. When Christianity spread across the Roman Empire and into Europe, it changed everything. Temples were destroyed, old gods forgotten, and pagan rituals banned. But instead of wiping everything out, the church began to blend in local traditions to make conversion easier. And today, we're exploring 10 pagan rituals that still live on inside Christianity. Reminders that some traditions never truly disappear. Number 1. Christmas on December 25th. The Bible never actually says when Jesus was born. There's no verse that points to December 25th. The earliest Christians didn't even celebrate his birth at all. Their focus was on his resurrection. So how did December 25th become such a big deal? Back in the 4th century, when Christianity was spreading across the Roman Empire, church leaders chose that date very strategically. Around that same time, Romans were celebrating a festival called Sol Invictus, or the birthday of the unconquered sun. It honored the sun god and marked the moment when daylight began to return after the darkest part of winter. There was also Saturnalia, a wild week-long Roman party full of food, gifts, and social chaos, celebrating the god Saturn. Imagine something between New Year's Eve and a carnival. It ended right around December 25th too. So instead of trying to stop everyone from celebrating, early Christians simply gave the day a new meaning: the birth of Christ, the light of the world. There's another theory called the calculation theory, which suggests that the church picked the date based on symbolic math, believing Jesus was conceived on March 25th, the spring equinox, and born exactly 9 months later on December 25th. Either way, the choice wasn't random. It blended existing traditions with a new faith, creating something people could accept and celebrate. Number 2. The Christmas tree and evergreen decorations. If you've ever dragged a pine tree into your living room, decorated it with lights, and called it Christmas, congratulations. You've kept an ancient pagan symbol alive. Long before Christmas trees became a thing, European pagans were already using evergreen plants during their winter festivals. In the middle of a cold, dark winter, when everything else was dead or bare, evergreens stood tall and green. To them, these trees represented life, fertility, and hope that spring would come again. People decorated their homes with branches of pine, fir, holly, and ivy. They believed they offered protection and symbolized the endurance of life through the darkest days. In ancient Germany and Scandinavia, trees were even seen as sacred, especially the mighty oak and fir, which some pagans connected to Yggdrasil, the mythical world tree that held together heaven, earth, and the underworld. But the actual Christmas tree tradition as we know it didn't appear until the 1500s in Germany. Christians there started setting up trees in their homes and decorating them to celebrate Christ's birth. Some stories even credit Martin Luther, the Protestant reformer, with adding candles to the branches after being inspired by starlight shining through the trees one winter night. From there, the tradition spread across Europe and eventually to the rest of the world. The tree's meaning shifted. It no longer symbolized nature's survival, but eternal life through Christ. Number 3. The Yule Log. Before Christmas had its stockings and cocoa, the Yule festival was already lighting up the long nights of the north. In ancient Norse and Germanic cultures, people would burn a giant log, sometimes even an entire tree, during the winter solstice to celebrate Yule, or Jol. This wasn't just about staying warm. The log symbolized the return of the sun. It was a promise that the light would come back after the darkest days of the year. Families would gather around the fire, drink, feast, and tell stories while the log burned for several days. The ashes from the Yule log were considered magical, said to protect the home from evil spirits and bring good luck and fertility for the coming year. When Christianity reached these regions, it rebranded it. The tradition of lighting a special log during the Christmas season was kept, but now it symbolized the light of Christ instead of the reborn sun. The ritual stayed popular in England, France, and Scandinavia, slowly turning from a massive outdoor bonfire into a smaller hearth tradition. Eventually, in places where fireplaces got smaller and wood harder to find, the Yule log took on a sweet new form. The Yule log cake, or bûche de Noël. Rolled, frosted, and decorated to look like a log, it kept the symbolism alive. Number 4. Easter eggs. Before Easter became about baskets and chocolate, eggs were already powerful symbols long before Christianity existed. In many ancient cultures, eggs represented life, fertility, and rebirth. It's the perfect image of nature's awakening in spring. Pagans celebrated the return of the sun and the fertility of the earth after winter, and eggs were part of that celebration. Some legends link the egg to the goddess Eostre, the Anglo-Saxon goddess of spring and fertility, whose festival marked the season's renewal. Others tie it to Ishtar, a Mesopotamian goddess of love and life. Though historians point out that the Ishtar equals Easter story is oversimplified, the truth remains. The egg was a sacred symbol of new beginnings across many ancient civilizations. When Christianity spread, the egg found a new meaning. Instead of symbolizing fertility, it began to represent resurrection. The hard shell symbolized the sealed tomb of Jesus, and cracking it open represented his emergence. There was also a practical reason eggs became tied to Easter. During Lent, the 40 days leading up to Easter, Christians were forbidden from eating meat or animal products, including eggs. But hens, of course, didn't stop laying them. So people boiled and preserved the eggs to last until Easter Sunday when the fast ended. When the celebration finally came, those eggs were eaten, shared, or decorated as a sign of joy and new life. In some Eastern Christian communities, eggs were dyed red to symbolize the blood of Christ. And over time, decorating eggs became an art form. Number 5. The Easter Bunny. Now let's talk about the furry little fellow who somehow delivers all those eggs. The Easter Bunny. It sounds funny when you think about it, a rabbit that lays eggs. Yet this strange tradition has roots that stretch far back into both pagan folklore and European folktales. In ancient times, hares and rabbits were powerful fertility symbols. People were aware of how fast they reproduced, and thus they were natural symbols of life, birth, as well as plenty. According to the myths of the old Germans, hares were supposedly linked to a goddess called Aostre, who was typically related to dawn and fertility, as well as new beginnings. One popular, though modern legend even says Aostre turned a bird into a rabbit, which then laid colorful eggs in her honor. The Easter Bunny we know today actually began as the Osterhase, or Easter hare, in the 17th century Germany. According to old tales, this hare would visit children during Eastertide, leaving eggs and gifts for those who had been good. The idea spread, and soon kids started building little nests out of grass, hoping the hare would leave colorful eggs in them. When German immigrants brought the custom to America in the 1700s, it evolved into the more commercial, family-friendly bunny we know now. There's also an interesting Christian twist. In medieval Europe, hares were thought to reproduce without mating, which we now know isn't true, and this led people to connect them with the Virgin Mary. Number 6. All Saints, All Souls, and the roots of Halloween. Before Halloween became all about costumes and candy, it started as something far older and far more spiritual. The original festival was Samhain, a Celtic celebration marking the end of harvest and the beginning of winter, the darker half of the year. To the ancient Celts, this was a liminal time when the boundary between the living and the dead blurred. Spirits and ancestors were believed to walk among the living. People lit bonfires to honor the dead, wore disguises to confuse wandering spirits, and left food offerings to keep them happy. It was both a time of fear and respect. When Christianity spread through Celtic lands, the church saw an opportunity. Rather than ban Samhain, it transformed it. All Saints' Day, All Hallows' Day was set on November 1st, and All Souls' Day followed on November 2nd, both meant to honor saints and departed souls. The night before, October 31st, became All Hallows' Eve, which we now call Halloween. But even as the holiday got a Christian makeover, the old customs stayed. People still dressed up, lit candles, and told ghost stories. In medieval Europe, souling became a thing. Poor villagers went door to door asking for soul cakes in exchange for prayers for the dead. That's basically the great-great-grandparent of trick-or-treating. Later, Irish and Scottish immigrants brought these customs to America, where pumpkins replaced turnips for carving jack-o'-lanterns. And Halloween slowly turned into the spooky, candy-filled celebration we know today. Number 7. Candlemas. Every February 2nd, churches around the world glow with the soft flicker of candles during Candlemas. It's a Christian celebration that marks the presentation of Christ in the temple and the purification of Mary. But long before candles were blessed in churches, this same time of year was already celebrated by pagans. In ancient Rome, February was the month of purification. People took part in rituals like Lupercalia, a wild festival meant to boost fertility and protect health. Meanwhile, across Celtic lands, February 1st and 2nd marked Imbolc. It was all about renewal, new life, and the first signs of the earth waking up again. When Christianity spread through Europe, it didn't erase these deeply rooted celebrations. Instead, the church endowed them with new significance. Fire and light, formerly symbolic of the arrival of spring, was now a symbol of Christ. The purification rituals were made spiritual and not physical. And even the once revered goddess Brigid, who was regarded as the protector of women, animals, and the hearth, was transformed into the Saint Brigid, one of the saints that Ireland adores the most. Number 8. Holy water. If you've ever dipped your fingers into a holy water font at church, you've taken part in one of Christianity's oldest traditions. The idea of using water to cleanse, protect, or bless didn't start with Christianity at all. Ancient Greeks and Romans practiced something called lustrations. They sprinkled water before sacrifices, washed hands and feet before entering temples, and even used water to drive away evil spirits. Water was seen as life itself, pure, powerful, and protective. When Christianity began, it didn't reject this symbolism. Instead, it gave it deeper spiritual meaning. Baptism became one of the most important Christian sacraments. It was at an early age that Christians started to bless water because they believed that it healed sickness and warded off evil. By the 9th century, holy water was being sprayed in the churches on Sundays, and people even brought it home to bless their houses, crops, and animals. Popes and priests refined the ritual over time. Pope St. Alexander I was said to have introduced the mixture of salt and prayer to create holy water. Pope Leo IV later made it a weekly custom. And interestingly, in the Greek church, holy water was blessed at the start of each lunar month, possibly to replace old pagan moon rituals. Number 9. Processions with saints' relics. Imagine ancient Rome during a festival. Streets filled with music, chanting, and statues of gods carried high above the crowd. These parades served as a means of people worshiping their gods and seeking safety. Sound familiar? When Christianity rose to prominence, it didn't take long for similar processions to appear, but with one big change. The gods were gone, and saints took their place. Instead of statues of Jupiter or Apollo, early Christians carried relics, bones, garments, or possessions of saints and martyrs, believing these objects held divine power. Once Emperor Constantine made Christianity a legal religion in the 4th century, the processions became open and splendid, just as the ancient Roman processions. Music, incense, and prayer were filling them. However, this time it was all about the intervention of saints. These processions gradually turned into a very personal faith. Individuals would travel long distances with pictures of their preferred saints praying to receive good harvests, protection, or healing. In other instances, pagan gods were merely reborn as saints with comparable functions. For example, Saint Demetrius, the patron of agriculture, might have inherited his role from the ancient goddess Demeter. Number 10. Church sites. Here's a fascinating secret hidden in plain sight. Many churches around the world sit on land that was once sacred to pagans. When Christianity began spreading, the church realized it couldn't just tear down every pagan temple or sacred site. People were too emotionally tied to them, so instead of destroying them, the church rebranded them. This approach, known as Interpretatio Christiana, Christian reinterpretation, turned old pagan spaces into Christian ones. Holy wells, springs, and groves that once honored nature spirits were rededicated to Christian saints. In Ireland, wells once sacred to Celtic gods became St. Brigid's wells. Across Europe, ancient temples were converted into churches. The Pantheon in Rome was transformed into a church for St. Mary and the martyrs in the 7th century. The Parthenon in Athens, built for Athena, became a church dedicated to the Virgin Mary. Even Martin of Tours, one of the early Christian leaders, was known for building churches right on top of destroyed pagan temples. Of course, there was also a practical side. Building in stone was hard and expensive, so reusing existing temples made sense. But symbolically, it sent a strong message. The old gods were gone, and the new faith had taken their place. If you learned something new today or love uncovering the hidden roots behind modern traditions, make sure to subscribe for more fascinating stories about history, culture, and the ancient rituals. Thanks for watching.